Hi everyone, I'm Eliza Steinberg. I'm a shareholder at Griffiths Law. And Griffiths Law, we used to do exclusively family law. We added a civil litigation department in 2018, but we are one of the top family law firms in the state.
Your favorite realtor here, Lina Krylov, and I am here with Eliza Steinberg. I'm doing my monthly business spotlight, and Eliza is with Griffiths Law.
Yep.
And she's my family law attorney, and she is one of the best attorneys in town. So, hi Eliza, thanks for taking the time to meet with me.
Hi Lina, thank you for having me.
Yes, so we're gonna do just a quick video and enlighten people what all is involved in family law.
Mm-hmm.
So, give it to me.
Sure. So a lot of people don't actually know what family law is, and it's kind of a broad umbrella that covers a lot of different topics. Divorce being the primary family law topic that most people know about, but it also includes matters of child custody, and then a huge part of a family law attorney's practice is often modifications of what happened in the divorce, and modifying child support and spousal support and parenting time and things that you've already put in place with the court. There are a few other topics that we also address in family law, like prenuptial agreements and
cohabitation agreements. Which I think a lot of people don't know what that is. I didn't know until recently either. But there are a lot of aspects, I think, where things can be done ahead of time where people can protect their assets.
Absolutely. And if you are one of those people who find themselves with money when you're getting into a new relationship or thinking about getting married, there are absolutely things you can do to help protect yourself in the event that something doesn't go right later. And so cohabitation agreement...
Stop talking about me, Eliza.
Cohabitation agreement is one of those things. If you're going to move in with a significant other, not in contemplation of marriage, and you want to make sure that there's a mutual agreement about what the terms of your living arrangements are, you can enter into a contract. We call it a cohabitation agreement to help protect yourself and also prevent against claims such as common law marriage.
Well, and I think that this is, it's all, it's kind of funny we're making fun of this, but things do come up, and I think that you don't really think about those things until they happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we're kind of trying to bring a little bit light to this subject, because there are, people can make claims against you for anything, I guess, right? Common law being one that you would probably have to defend yourself against, correct?
Yeah, Colorado is a unique state in that regard, or one of the few states that still has common law marriage.
Okay.
And I see them cross my desk every few months where someone is alleging that they're married to someone and the other person says, whoa, that's not my understanding, we're not married. And typically it goes to a contested litigation.
Okay. And, I hear a lot of things about common law over the years, and I think some of them just aren't true. So is there a time limit for somebody to live with you where it becomes a common law marriage?
No, that is a misconception.
Okay.
The governing case on common law marriage is called Hogsett.
Okay.
And basically what it says is that there needs to be a mutual intent between both people that they agree that they're married. And in the absence of that mutual intent, the court can look to conduct to see if what these parties have been doing would reflect that of a marriage. And I know that sounds kind of complicated, but there's a bunch of different factors, so to speak, that the court can look at to see if there's evidence of a common law marriage.
But what are the major things? So I know that, you don't, if you don't file taxes together, correct?
Yeah, taxes is a very key piece of element.
Okay.
Key piece of element. Key piece of evidence that a court might look to. If you're filing joint as married tax returns,
yes,
and then you're subsequently saying I'm not married, well, that's a conflicting thing. And so tax returns, bank accounts, designating someone as a spouse on a beneficiary form, something like that. That's evidence of
owning
marriage.
real estate together.
Owning real estate together.
And what else? What else can you think of? Oh, insurance. We were going to talk about this.
Yeah, so, what I mentioned, the beneficiary form. Yeah, so you might put someone as the beneficiary of your life insurance and say spouse.
Oh, don't do that. Don't do that. Also, I think a lot of times we hear about people, like one person in a relationship will have really good health insurance, right? And so they add their significant other to their policy and they'll say that they're married.
Yeah.
And so that can also be used against you. So watch yourselves, people.
And just not to scare anyone, one issue is not necessarily going to determine the entire case. It's just one thing that the court might consider when looking at the overall claim of a common law marriage.
Okay. All right. So, well, prenups are always good too. So if somebody is not happy in a relationship and they're thinking about going through a divorce, what would be the first step that they do?
They need to consult with an attorney.
Okay.
And so don't go down the rabbit hole of Google and try to figure out what all your rights are in a divorce yourself, because Google's not always accurate. I would definitely consult with an attorney, and I would consult with multiple attorneys. It's very good to get different advice and see if everyone's saying the same thing, see if everyone's raising the same red flags in your particular case. And also, it's a personality match. Who you hire as your attorney in such a important time in your life when you're dealing with your family is really important, and you need to trust that person, and you need to make sure that you're on the same page and that you like them.
And we were just chatting before we started this video about that. For me, you got referred to me through a very good friend of mine, and obviously I did my research online as well, and you guys, Griffiths Law always comes up in the top 2, top 3 searches. But for me, and that's what I was saying, was so important is having that connection with somebody. Just like when you're working with a realtor, I think, there's a lot of us that do a good amount of business, right? But if I don't like you and you don't like me, it's not going to work. And I think it's the same thing when you're picking an attorney, right? A lot of times there were things that Eliza would tell me that did not make me happy during the custody case she represented me in. But, I trusted her to do the right thing for me, right? So she knew what my intentions were. She knew what I wanted. And so, unfortunately, when it comes to any, I think, litigation, right, you're not always going to hear things that you want to hear, right?
There's strategy decisions that have to be made.
Right, and you have to, I think there's always a little give and take, and which is really hard to acknowledge at the time when you're going through something that's so stressful.
Yes.
But I think, at least from my personal experience, I think taking a moment to step back a lot of times when certain things are happening during the court cases or, the pre-court time period or whatever, and just taking a step back and just realizing that, when this is over in a year or two, you won't even remember about this happening. Like, I think that's something I'm finally coming to terms with now.
And it's easier said than done when you're in the moment.
100%.
It's very, very
100%.
difficult to put yourself outside of the emotion and the stress of the litigation. And that's where you do rely on your attorney. You rely on your attorney to say, hey, you're not being reasonable right now, and this is a really important strategy decision that we have to make, and I know you don't like it, but you're going to be better long term if you go with this path.
And I think that was one of the best things about you was that, you kind of told me, hey, if you do this is going to happen. Most likely, you can't guarantee it, but, if you do this is going to happen. And so at least I had, when I was making a decision of which way I wanted to go, that, I kind of had an idea of what would happen.
Yep.
So for me, I think that, I absolutely love Eliza. So I hope I'm not a client for life, but right now it feels like I am. But I think, anybody who is going through any kind of child custody or divorce, or I think definitely reach out to Eliza. She's amazing. And, at least come in and, for a consultation.
Absolutely.
And see, it's totally worth the price you pay for a consultation to know where you stand.
Yeah, in a consultation, we just bill at our hourly rate. You can consult multiple times, but it's better to be informed. What you don't want to do is start the process and not know what your rights are. And I see too many people come to us after the fact and say, hey, I settled in mediation. Neither of us had attorneys. And here's my agreement. And I go, oh, I really wish you would have at least talked to an attorney before you signed this, because there is so much you either left on the table or you created a lot of problems for yourself down the road because this is not enforceable.
And can those be modified?
Certain things can be modified, certain things cannot be modified. So things relating to the children, generally always modifiable. Parenting time, modifiable.
Okay.
Provided that, the modification is in the best interest of the kids. Child support, always modifiable.
Okay.
You cannot contract away your child's right to receive appropriate support. So there are things that are always modifiable, but other things are not.
Like what?
So you might come to an agreement on your assets and debts, and
it's settled. It's settled.
It's settled. It's settled.
It's a final settlement.
Yeah, and you might be looking at other, potential civil remedies if there was fraud or something like that. But generally, when you sign your name on the dotted line at the end of the divorce and say this is what we think is fair and this is the division of our assets, it's very hard to undo unless there was a material misrepresentation or non-disclosure or something like that.
And it's funny you say that, because recently I spoke to a client that was referred to me, and she said she's going through a divorce, but neither party wanted to retain an attorney, and I was like, you're crazy. I was like, you should always have an attorney.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be nasty and drug out. I mean, you just need to have somebody who's guiding you through the process and making sure that everything is being addressed.
Absolutely. And just because you hire an attorney does not mean it's going to be a contentious, high conflict litigation.
Right.
The family law community in Denver is very small. And, there are a lot of reputable attorneys and we work really well together. And sometimes doing it right is better for you in the long term, and making sure that, all your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted and you both have representation, and then you can both move on and hopefully
be happier. Yeah.
Be happier. Yeah.
And that's totally okay. And speaking of that, a lot of reputable attorneys, that's right. I think one of the other things too to look for when hiring an attorney is a lot of times you get these attorneys that come off as they're total bulldogs, mm-hmm. and they're very aggressive. But we've also run into some of those throughout the process of working together. And I think a lot of those attorneys, it's not that they're really that much of a bulldog. They're not very professional.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, and I think it's only amplified in the post-pandemic era, professionalism has changed. I
think in your industry and my industry, we always talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, when emotions are running high, people are scared. And in both of our professions, we see that. We see people scared, especially right now for
real estate.
In real estate. People, they don't know what the future holds.
Right.
With interest rates are,
rising.
Yeah.
And time to buy.
And so, I lost my train of thought a little bit.
It's like, what? No.
But yeah, I think when people are scared, they act out, and you need to hire somebody who can separate themselves from the drama, especially in family law, and really be able to cut to the chase and say, hey, this is what you need to know. Don't engage in that because it's not going to serve any beneficial purpose.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think you could be a bulldog without being rude.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Don't let this cuteness scare you right here, because she is a bulldog. I think a lot of times it's almost better because they don't see you coming.
Yeah. And it's about understanding the law.
Yeah.
And being prepared.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's like in anything else.
Mm-hmm. I can't say that about every attorney.
Well, what were we talking about the other day when you said, they'd been doing it for a long time, but they had no idea what they were doing. Yeah. Just because you've been licensed for 20 years doesn't make you a good attorney. Yeah. So same thing in real estate. I remember when I first got into business, I would hear that a lot. Like, I've been doing this for 30 years. I'm like, well, it's time to retire, buddy, because you're not that good at it. All right. What other tips can we get from you today?
Well, prenups come up a lot.
Okay.
And so, people say, is it worth it? Is it not? I think that if you have assets to protect, you should absolutely explore the option of getting a prenuptial agreement. Prenup would be an agreement that you sign before you get married.
Okay.
And you need to be thinking about it well before you get married. You should not be signing a prenup on, the eve of your wedding. And
it needs to be discussed, obviously, prior to you.
Absolutely, and there needs to be disclosure. Everyone needs to know what they are signing, and it's best to have representation on both sides.
Right.
And so then the next question I usually get is, well, is it enforceable?
Yes.
And most of the time, if you both have good attorneys and you followed all the rules,
yeah.
Then it is enforceable. There are a couple things that the court can always review. The court can always review for fairness, attorney fees, an attorney fee waiver, and a spousal support waiver. So what they don't want to do is leave somebody completely with nothing at the end, and one person walks away with their millions.
Got it.
So there are a couple of things that are always subject to review, and generally a good prenup is enforceable, but doesn't mean it's not going to cost a lot to
fight it.
To get through that process.
But that's why she's saying you should have an attorney on both sides.
Yep.
So what we're probably talking about is, let's say, and I'm not going to say the man has the money. We're going to say the woman is the one that has the money, and the man does not have the money. So in a prenup, the judge is going to look to make sure that if they're married for 20 years, and they have kids together, let's say, right, that even though he signed all these things prior to being married, that he's not left with absolutely nothing, right?
Yeah, and specifically it's the spousal maintenance, the spousal support, and attorney's fees.
Now with spousal support, correct me if I'm wrong, but is it, I heard it's half the time that you're married. Is that correct, usually without a prenup?
So not in every circumstance, it depends on how long you've been married.
Okay.
So it's formulaic. When you calculate spousal support, it's governed by a formula in the Colorado statute.
Okay.
And it can be up to half the length of the marriage, or even more, but it depends on how many years you're married. So if you're married 20 years, generally it's going to be half the length of the marriage.
So for 10 years, you're going to be writing somebody bloody checks unless you settle.
The statute doesn't really provide for what happens after 20 years. And so the argument could be made that if you're married 30 years, it should be 15 years of maintenance.
Wow.
Some people argue that it's capped at 10 because the statute doesn't go past 20. So.
Okay. But what if you're only married for 2 years?
If you're only married for 2 years, you don't get spousal maintenance under the statute. Doesn't mean that someone might not come up with some argument to ask for it.
Okay.
But the statute only starts at a 3-year marriage.
3 years. So if you're married less than 3 years, it's still time to get out. No, just kidding. Well, thank you, Eliza.
Of course.
And again, we're going to put up Eliza's information on the video so you guys can reach out. But I think it's always good, even before you get married or before you start living with somebody, just to come in for a consultation if you have concerns.
Yes.
You know? Yes. It's always easier, I think, if you are proactive versus being reactive.
Absolutely, because you don't necessarily know what you need to look for until you talk to an attorney. There are a lot of different facets of a divorce and what kind of claims you can make for separate property, for example, and you won't necessarily know what you are looking for until you get the legal advice that you need.
Yay! Well, thank you so much again. Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you.